The silver collar burned against my throat as I stood before my seventh rejection in 3 years. But this time, the Alpha's words cut deeper than the metal ever could. You're not just wolfless, Arya. You're cursed. The ceremonial circle felt like a noose tightening around me. 50 pairs of eyes bore into my skin, each gaze heavy with disgust, pity, or cruel satisfaction. The Crescent Moon Pack had gathered to witness what they called a cleansing, the formal rejection of a defective member. Me. Alpha Marcus Redclaw towered over me, his presence commanding even without his wolf form. The silver collar he'd forced around my neck 3 days ago was meant to suppress any latent wolf abilities, but for someone like me, it served only as humiliation. A reminder that I was less than nothing. Arya Blackthorn, his voice boomed across the clearing, each word deliberate and cutting. Daughter of traitors, bearer of cursed blood. You have lived among us for 6 months, eating our food, sleeping under our protection, and still your wolf refuses to surface. I kept my chin up despite the burning pain radiating from my throat. I'd learned long ago that showing weakness only made it worse. My parents weren't traitors. The crowd murmured, several wolves growling low in their throats. Marcus's eyes flashed gold, a warning that his wolf was close to the surface. Your parents, he snarled, stepping closer until I could smell the dominance rolling off him in waves, were alphas of the Shadowpine Pack. They died under mysterious circumstances, leaving behind a daughter who should have been powerful beyond measure. Instead, we got you. Broken. Wolfless. A disgrace to their memory. Each word was a physical blow. I'd heard variations of this speech 6 times before, from 6 different alphas who'd taken me in out of obligation to my parents' legacy, only to cast me out when I failed to meet their expectations. The first had been kind about it. Alpha Sarah of the Moonbrook Pack had simply said I wasn't a good fit and arranged for my transfer. The second had been more direct, calling me a disappointment before shipping me off to the third. Each rejection had grown more brutal, more personal, until I began to believe what they said about me. Maybe I was cursed. Tell them, Marcus commanded, his voice carrying the alpha power that should have forced my wolf to submit. When nothing happened, because there was nothing to submit, his lip curled in disgust. Tell them what happened to your parents. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. This was new. None of the other alphas had made me relive that night. They died protecting the pack. Liar. The word cracked like a whip. They died because they meddled with forces beyond their understanding. Dark magic. Blood rituals. They tried to create the perfect heir and instead birthed an abomination. The crowd's growls grew louder. Someone spat in my direction. A child threw a stone that struck my shoulder, and no one stopped them. I don't know what you're talking about, I whispered, though something deep in my chest fluttered with unease. There had always been gaps in the story of my parents' death. Details that didn't quite fit. Marcus laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Of course you don't. Because admitting the truth would mean accepting that you're not just broken, you're dangerous. He circled me slowly, like a predator toying with wounded prey. The silver collar seemed to tighten with each of his steps. 7 packs have tried to help you, he continued. 7 alphas have invested time, energy, and resources into awakening your wolf. All have failed. Do you know why? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because there is no wolf to awaken. Your parents' experiments killed it before you were born, leaving behind something else entirely. Something that shouldn't exist. The words hit me like a physical blow. I staggered backward, my vision blurring with unshed tears. Around me, the pack members nodded in agreement, their expressions ranging from disgusted to afraid. Please, I heard myself say, hating how small my voice sounded. I just want to belong somewhere. I can learn. I can be useful. I don't need a wolf to. To what? Marcus's voice rose to a roar that silenced the entire clearing. To pretend you're one of us? To contaminate our bloodlines? To bring whatever curse killed your parents down on our heads? He gestured sharply, and 2 enforcers stepped forward. Beta James and Gamma Lisa, wolves I'd thought were beginning to accept me. The sympathy in their eyes made it worse somehow. "Remove the collar," Marcus ordered. They hesitated. James cleared his throat. "Alpha, she's still technically under pack protection until." "Remove it. Now." James approached me carefully, his fingers finding the hidden clasp at the back of my neck. The moment the silver lifted away from my skin, relief flooded through me. The burning stopped, and I could breathe freely for the first time in days. But the relief was short-lived. "You are no longer welcome in Crescent Moon territory," Marcus declared, his words carrying the weight of Alpha law. "You have 1 hour to gather your belongings and leave. If you're found on our lands after sunset, you'll be treated as a rogue." The finality in his voice made my knees weak. Being declared rogue was essentially a death sentence. Any wolf could kill me without consequence. Where am I supposed to go? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Marcus's smile was cold and sharp. "That's no longer my problem. But might I suggest the Forbidden Territories? You'll fit right in with the other unnatural things that lurk there." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Someone called out a crude joke about feeding the shadow creatures. Another suggested I'd make good fertilizer for the cursed trees. I turned and walked away before they could see me break. My belongings fit in a single backpack, a sad testament to 22 years of life. Everything I owned could be carried on my shoulders: a few changes of clothes, a water bottle, the last photo of my parents, and the strange pendant my mother had been wearing when she died. It was the only thing of hers I'd been allowed to keep, though none of the Alphas could tell me what the twisted silver symbol meant. An hour later, I stood at the edge of Crescent Moon territory, staring into the dark expanse of the Forbidden Territories. Ancient pine trees stretched endlessly into shadows that seemed to move independently of the wind. No pack claimed this land. No wolf dared hunt here. Stories said the territories were where magic went to die, where experiments in blood and power had poisoned the very earth. Others claimed they were alive with malevolent spirits that fed on unwary travelers. I'd always assumed they were just stories meant to keep young wolves from wandering too far from home. Now, homeless and rejected for the 7th time, I realized I was about to find out. The first step across the boundary line sent a shiver down my spine. Not from cold, the evening air was still warm, but from something deeper. The territories felt different. Charged. Like the air before a storm, pregnant with possibility and danger. Behind me, I could hear the Crescent Moon Patrol making sure I actually left. Their whispered conversations carried on the wind, full of relief that the cursed girl was finally gone. I kept walking. The deeper I went, the quieter the normal forest sounds became. No birds sang in these trees. No small creatures rustled through the underbrush. Even the wind seemed muted, as if the forest itself held its breath. But I wasn't alone. Eyes watched me from the shadows between the trees. Not animal eyes. I'd learned to recognize those during my years of moving between packs. These were different. Ancient. Knowing. They didn't feel threatening, exactly, but they were undeniably present. Waiting. By the time full darkness fell, I'd lost track of how far I'd traveled. My feet ached, my stomach cramped with hunger, and exhaustion weighed heavy on my shoulders. I found a small clearing beside what might have once been a stream and decided to make camp. As I gathered dry wood for a fire, something stirred in my chest. Not the familiar ache of loneliness I'd carried for years, but something new. A warmth that seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. I paused, my hands full of kindling, and looked around the clearing. The eyes were still there, watching from the tree line, but now they seemed approving. "What do you want?" I called out, my voice stronger than it had been all day. The response came not as words, but as a feeling. A sense of welcome that wrapped around me like a warm embrace. For the first time since my parents died, I felt like I belonged somewhere. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like coming home. As I knelt to build my fire, the pendant at my throat began to grow warm against my skin. In the gathering darkness of the Forbidden Territories, something ancient stirred to wakefulness. And deep in my chest, in the place where a wolf should have lived, something else began to unfold. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 2. The fire died 3 hours before dawn, and with it, what remained of my strength. I huddled against the base of an ancient oak, shivering despite the pendant's growing warmth against my throat. Something was wrong, more wrong than just exhaustion and hunger. My skin felt like it was burning from the inside out, and every breath came harder than the last. Silver poisoning. The realization hit me with crystalline clarity. The collar had been on my neck for 3 days straight, and while most wolves could handle short exposure, prolonged contact was lethal. Marcus had known this when he made me wear it. He'd planned for me to die out here, alone and forgotten. My vision blurred as another wave of agony rolled through me. The pendant at my throat pulsed with heat now, almost too hot to bear, but I lacked the strength to remove it. Around me, those watching eyes had multiplied. Dozens of them now, forming a circle in the darkness just beyond where my fire had been. "Please," I whispered to whoever or whatever was out there. "I don't want to die like this." The response came as a whisper of wind through the trees, carrying with it the scent of pine and something darker, something wild and dangerous and utterly masculine. Power rolled through the clearing like a physical force, making the hair on my arms stand on end. Then he stepped out of the shadows, and the world stopped. He was massive, easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to block out the moon. Dark hair fell in waves to his shoulders, framing a face that looked like it had been carved from stone by an artist obsessed with masculine perfection. But it was his eyes that stole my breath. They glowed silver in the darkness, ancient and knowing and filled with a hunger that made my pulse race despite my weakened state. Power radiated from him in waves so strong they were almost visible. This wasn't just an alpha, this was something far beyond anything I'd ever encountered. The very air around him seemed to bend to his will. "Arya Blackthorn," he said, and his voice was like whiskey and smoke, rich and deep and commanding. "Daughter of Alexander and Elena. I've been waiting for you." I tried to speak, to ask how he knew my parents' names, but only managed a weak cough that sent fresh spikes of pain through my chest. He was beside me in an instant, moving with inhuman speed, and suddenly strong arms were lifting me as if I weighed nothing at all. "Easy, little wolf," he murmured, though there was nothing little about the way his touch sent electricity racing through my veins. "You're safe now." Safe. The word was foreign to me, but something in his voice made me believe it. My head fell against his chest, and I could hear the steady thrum of his heartbeat beneath my ear. It was oddly comforting. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper. His arms tightened around me. "Kael Shadowmere. And you, Arya Blackthorn, are mine." The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it sent a warm shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the silver poisoning. I tried to process his name. Shadowmere was familiar, like something from a half-remembered story, but consciousness was slipping away from me again. "Sleep," he commanded, and his voice carried an alpha compulsion so powerful that my eyes closed involuntarily. "I'll take care of everything." For the first time in years, I felt completely safe. I woke to the sound of running water and the most comfortable bed I'd ever experienced. Silk sheets caressed my skin, and the mattress beneath me felt like sleeping on a cloud. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting rainbow prisms across stone walls that looked ancient but well-maintained. This definitely wasn't the forbidden territories. I sat up slowly, relieved when the movement didn't send waves of agony through my body. The silver poisoning was gone, leaving me feeling stronger than I had in months. I was wearing a simple white dress that fit perfectly, though I had no memory of changing clothes. "You're awake." That voice, whiskey and smoke and pure masculine authority. I turned toward the doorway and found him leaning against the frame, watching me with those impossible silver eyes. In the daylight, he was even more devastating. He wore dark jeans and a black shirt that clung to muscles that looked carved from marble. His hair caught the morning sun, revealing threads of silver that suggested age, though his face appeared to be that of a man in his early 30s. "Where am I?" I asked, proud that my voice came out steady. "Shadowmere." He pushed away from the doorframe and walked toward me with that predatory grace I'd noticed the night before. "My kingdom." Kingdom. The word made something click into place. Shadowmere. I'd heard that name before, in whispered stories around pack fires. The lost kingdom of the Alpha King. The immortal ruler who'd disappeared centuries ago, leaving behind only legends. "You're him," I breathed. "The Alpha King from the stories." His mouth curved in a smile that was both beautiful and dangerous. "Guilty as charged. Though I prefer Kale." I stared at him, trying to process this information. "But the stories say you're 500 years old. 537, to be precise." He settled into a chair beside the bed, close enough that I could smell his scent, pine and earth and something uniquely male that made my mouth water. "Old enough to know my mate when I find her." The word mate hit me like a physical blow. I scrambled backward on the bed until my back hit the headboard. "No. Absolutely not. I don't have a wolf. I can't be anyone's mate." His eyes flashed with something that might have been amusement. "Can't you?" Before I could ask what he meant, the air in the room shifted. It became thicker somehow, charged with energy that made my skin tingle. And then I saw them. Spirits. Dozens of them, filling the room with translucent forms that glowed with soft, silvery light. They were wolves, some in human form, others as magnificent beasts, and they were all looking at me with expressions of wonder and recognition. "Welcome home, young Alpha," one of them said, an elderly woman with kind eyes and a crown of silver hair. "We've been waiting so long for your return." I pressed my hands to my eyes, certain I was hallucinating. "This isn't real. People don't see dead wolves. It's not possible." "Nothing is impossible in Shadowmere." Kale's voice was soft, closer than before. When I opened my eyes, he was sitting on the edge of the bed, his hand reaching toward my face. "This is what your parents died trying to protect. This power, this gift that makes you unique among all wolves." The mention of my parents made me flinch. Don't talk about them." "Why?" "Because it hurts. Because facing the truth means accepting that everything you believed about yourself was a lie." His fingers brushed my cheek, and the contact sent electricity shooting through every nerve ending. "You're not broken, Arya. You're evolved." The spirits around us murmured agreement, their voices creating a symphony of sound that somehow didn't overwhelm my senses. Instead, it felt like coming home. "I don't understand any of this," I whispered. "Then let me explain." Kale's thumb traced along my jawline, and I found myself leaning into the touch despite every instinct screaming at me to run. "Your parents weren't just alphas, Arya. They were guardians. Protectors of the old magic that most werewolves have forgotten. They knew their daughter would inherit abilities that went far beyond shifting into a wolf." "What kind of abilities?" His smile was gentle now, encouraging. "You can speak with the dead. Command spirits. See through the veil that separates our world from the next. In ancient times, wolves like you were revered as bridges between life and death. They were called soul walkers." Soul walker. The title resonated deep in my chest, in that place where my wolf should have been. The spirits around us seemed to glow brighter at the words. "But why me? Why now?" "Because the supernatural world is changing," Kale said, his expression growing serious. "Old enemies are stirring. Ancient seals are weakening. We need someone who can communicate with both the living and the dead to help us prepare for what's coming." He stood and walked to the window, gazing out at a view I couldn't see from the bed. "Your parents understood this. They were part of a secret alliance working to protect not just werewolves, but all supernatural creatures from a threat that could destroy everything we've built." "What threat?" When he turned back to me, his eyes held shadows that spoke of centuries of pain and loss. There are things in this world older than werewolves, Arya. Things that hunger for chaos and destruction. They've been locked away for millennia, but their prison is failing. When it falls completely, we'll need every advantage we can get. The weight of his words settled over me like a heavy cloak. And you think I'm some kind of advantage? I know you are. He was beside the bed again, close enough that I could see flecks of blue in his silver eyes. The bond between us proves it. Fate doesn't make mistakes when it comes to mates. There was that word again. Mate. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of attraction that seemed to cloud my thinking whenever he was close. I barely know you. I can't just accept that we're destined to be together based on some supernatural bond. Can't you? His voice dropped to a whisper, and suddenly the air between us crackled with tension. Tell me you don't feel it, Arya. Tell me your body doesn't recognize mine. Tell me your soul doesn't sing when I'm near. I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. Because he was right. From the moment I'd seen him in the clearing, something inside me had awakened. Something that had nothing to do with wolves and everything to do with the man sitting inches away from me. The bond grows stronger every moment we're together, he continued, his hand moving to rest on the bed beside my leg. Fighting it will only cause us both pain. I've been rejected 7 times, I said, my voice barely audible. I can't go through that again. His expression softened, and for a moment, the ancient immortal Alpha King looked heartbreakingly vulnerable. I've been alone for 5 centuries, Arya. Do you honestly think I would risk my heart on anything less than absolute certainty? Before I could answer, one of the spirits, a young man who looked barely older than me, spoke up. He speaks the truth, Soul Walker. We have watched him pace these halls like a caged beast, waiting for the one who could complete him. You are that one. Other spirits murmured agreement, their voices creating a chorus of encouragement that made my chest tight with emotion. These were Kale's pack, I realized. Wolves who had died serving him, who remained bound to him even in death. How many? I asked quietly. Kale frowned. How many what? How many have died because of you? How many spirits call this place home because they fell in battle serving the great Alpha King? Pain flashed across his features so quickly I almost missed it. Too many, he said simply. Which is why I've stayed hidden for so long. Why I convinced myself I was better off alone. Until now. Until you. His hand moved closer to mine on the bed, not quite touching but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. You changed everything the moment you crossed into the forbidden territories. How? I didn't do anything. You survived. The words were soft but filled with conviction. Silver poisoning should have killed you within hours. Instead, you fought it off long enough for me to find you. The pendant your mother gave you helped, but it was your own power that kept you alive. I touched the warm metal at my throat instinctively. What is it? A soul walker's focus. It helps channel your abilities, keeps them from overwhelming you until you learn proper control. His eyes grew distant. Elena wore it for years before she passed it to you. The casual mention of my mother's name made me go still. You knew her. You actually knew my parents. I did. Something in his voice made warning bells go off in my head. How well? Kale stood abruptly, moving to the window again. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. Well enough. The evasion sent ice through my veins. What aren't you telling me? Arya. What aren't you telling me? I repeated, putting all the authority I could muster into my voice. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, the words hit me like physical blows. I was there the night they died. The world tilted sideways. What? There was a meeting. A gathering of Alliance members to discuss strategy. Your parents' pack house was supposed to be secure, warded against attack. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. But someone betrayed us. Someone told our enemies exactly when and where to strike. And you were there, I said, my voice hollow. You were there, and they died, and you survived. Yes. Did you try to save them? The question hung in the air between us like a blade. When Cale turned from the window, his face was a mask of anguish that looked carved from stone. I tried, he said quietly. But I was too late. By the time I fought through the attacking forces, Alexander and Elena were already gone. The house was burning, and you. He swallowed hard. You were just a baby, screaming in your crib while flames consumed everything around you. You saved me. I pulled you from the fire, yes. But saving you? He shook his head. I handed you over to the first pack willing to take you and disappeared. I told myself it was for your own protection, that you'd be safer without me around to draw danger to you. The spirits in the room had gone completely silent, their glowing forms perfectly still as they watched our exchange. Even they seemed to sense the importance of this moment. But that wasn't really why you left, was it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. His silver eyes met mine, and in them I saw 5 centuries of guilt and self-recrimination. No. I left because I was a coward. Because looking at you meant accepting that I'd failed the 2 people who trusted me most. Because staying meant facing the possibility that I was the reason they died. The confession hung between us like a chasm. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to rage against the injustice of it all. But another part, a deeper, more primal part, recognized the pain in his voice as matching my own. Do you think you were? I asked softly. The reason they died? I don't know. The admission seemed to cost him everything. And that uncertainty has haunted me every day for 22 years. I stared at him, this immortal king who commanded spirits and ruled a hidden kingdom, and saw only a man carrying an unbearable burden of guilt. It should have made me hate him. Instead, it made him seem heartbreakingly human. The bond between us, I said slowly. Is it real, or is it just guilt? Some kind of supernatural obligation to protect the daughter of the friends you failed? His head snapped up, eyes blazing with sudden intensity. It's real, Arya. Whatever else you might think of me, whatever sins I might carry, what I feel for you is absolutely real. How can you be sure? In response, he moved toward the bed with that predatory grace, stopping only when he was close enough that I could see the silver flecks dancing in his eyes. Because when I look at you, I don't see Alexander and Elena's daughter. I see my mate. My equal. My salvation. His hand reached for mine, and this time I didn't pull away. The moment our fingers touched, electricity shot through me with enough force to make me gasp. The sensation was overwhelming, not just physical attraction, but something deeper. A recognition that went soul deep. The mate bond doesn't care about guilt or obligation, he said softly, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. It only cares about 2 souls that are meant to be together. Around us, the spirits began to glow brighter, their forms becoming more solid as they fed off the energy crackling between Cale and me. It was beautiful and terrifying and completely beyond anything I'd ever experienced. I need time, I whispered. Time to process all of this. Time to understand what I am, what you are, what we might be together. Time we may not have, he said, though his voice was gentle. The threats I mentioned earlier aren't theoretical, Arya. There have already been attacks on Alliance members. Supernatural creatures are going missing. The seals that hold back the ancient darkness grow weaker every day. Then teach me, I said, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. Teach me to use these abilities. Help me understand my power. But don't ask me to accept everything at once. Don't ask me to trust blindly. His smile was soft and genuine, transforming his face from devastatingly handsome to absolutely breathtaking. I can work with that. Good. I squeezed his hand, marveling at how right the contact felt. Because ready or not, it looks like I'm about to become something I never imagined possible. And what's that? I looked around the room filled with spirits, at this impossible man who claimed to be my mate, at the pendant around my throat that hummed with ancient power, and finally back at Kale's expectant face. A soul walker. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 3. The training began at dawn, in a courtyard that existed somewhere between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. I stood in the center of a circle carved from black stone, symbols I didn't recognize etched deep into its surface. Around me, spirits materialized one by one, some familiar faces from the night before, others new arrivals drawn by the growing strength of my power. They watched with expressions of anticipation and hope that made my chest tight with an emotion I couldn't name. Focus on your breathing, Kale instructed from where he leaned against a marble pillar. Even in the early morning light, he was devastating, dark hair tousled from sleep, wearing simple training clothes that did nothing to hide the lethal grace of his movements. The spirits respond to your emotional state. If you're agitated, they'll become agitated. Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one trying to learn powers that defied everything he'd been taught about the natural world. I closed my eyes and tried to find the center of calm I'd discovered the night before. The pendant at my throat grew warm, and immediately the whispers began, dozens of voices speaking in languages both familiar and foreign, sharing fragments of memories and emotions that weren't my own. Good, Kale's voice was soft, encouraging. Now, try to speak to just one of them. Choose a spirit that feels familiar. I opened my eyes and found myself looking at the elderly woman who had first welcomed me. Her silver hair caught the morning light like spun moonbeams, and her kind eyes reminded me of someone I couldn't quite place. "What's your name?" I asked aloud, feeling slightly foolish. Her smile was radiant. "Evangeline Moonwhisper, child. I was Shadowmere's head healer for 40 years before the fever took me." She glided closer, her form becoming more solid as I focused on her. "I knew your mother when she was no older than you are now." The casual mention of my mother made my heart skip a beat. "You knew Elena?" "Knew her? I delivered her first child." Evangeline's expression grew wistful. "Such a difficult birth, and the babe so small. But Elena was fierce in her love, even then." "First child?" The words came out sharp with confusion. "I don't have any siblings." Evangeline's face crumpled with sadness. "Oh, sweet girl. The fever that took me claimed little Marcus as well. He would have been your older brother." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. A brother. I'd had a brother who died before I was born. Why didn't anyone tell me? "Because grief makes people keep secrets," Kale said quietly. When I turned to look at him, his expression was carefully neutral. "Your parents never spoke of Marcus to anyone. The loss nearly destroyed them. But you knew." "I knew." His admission hung in the air between us, another secret he'd kept. Another piece of my history that had been hidden from me. Before I could process the implications, a new voice cut through the morning air like a blade through silk. "How touching. The little orphan girl learning to play with ghosts." I spun toward the sound and found myself face to face with the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. She was tall and elegant, with platinum blonde hair that fell in perfect waves to her waist and violet eyes that seemed to see straight through me. Power radiated from her in waves that made my skin prickle with unease. "Luna," Kale's voice carried a warning that made several spirits fade from view. "You're not welcome here." The woman, Luna, laughed, a sound like crystal chimes that somehow managed to convey complete disdain. "Not welcome in my own ancestral home? How times have changed, brother dear." "Sister." This was Kale's sister, the one he'd mentioned led the court faction that opposed him. Looking at her now, I could see the family resemblance, the same aristocratic bone structure, the same otherworldly beauty. But where Kale's presence felt like safety and strength, hers felt like winter wind cutting through bare skin. "What do you want, Seraphina?" Kale stepped closer to me, and I caught the subtle shift in his posture that spoke of a predator preparing for battle. "Luna Seraphina," she corrected with ice in her voice. "I've earned my title through service to this kingdom, unlike your pet here." her violet gaze fixed on me with obvious contempt. I want to know when this charade ends. There's no charade. Isn't there? Seraphina moved with liquid grace, circling us like a shark scenting blood. A convenient mate appears just as the other packs begin to question your leadership. A girl with no wolf, no pack, no allies to avenge her if she were to mysteriously disappear. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. I felt several spirits move closer, their forms solidifying as they responded to my rising anger. Careful, sister, Kale's voice dropped to a growl that raised every hair on my body. Your jealousy is showing. Seraphina's perfect features twisted into something ugly. Jealousy? Of this broken little thing? She gestured dismissively in my direction. Please. I'm trying to save you from making the biggest mistake of your very long life. The only mistake I see is allowing you to continue breathing, I said quietly, surprised by the venom in my own voice. Both siblings turned to stare at me. Around us, the spirits began to glow brighter, feeding off the energy crackling through the courtyard. Excuse me? Seraphina's voice could have frozen flame. You heard me. I stepped forward, pleased when she instinctively took a step back. I may not have a wolf, but I have something you'll never possess, respect. These spirits died protecting this kingdom, and they recognize me as their soul walker. You want to know what they think of you? Without waiting for an answer, I reached out with my newfound abilities, touching the consciousness of every spirit in the courtyard. What I found there made my blood boil. They remember you, Luna Seraphina, I said, letting their memories flow through me. They remember how you sent them into battles you knew they couldn't win. How you used their deaths to advance your own political agenda. How you... Enough. Seraphina's composure cracked completely, her eyes flashing with a light that spoke of barely contained violence. You know nothing about the sacrifices I've made for this kingdom. I know enough. I let the spirit's anger fuel my own, felt power rising in me like a tide. I know you've been plotting against Kale for decades. I know you've been in contact with the packs that rejected me. And I know you're planning something that will get a lot of innocent people killed. The silence that followed was deafening. Seraphina's face went white, then red, then settled into a mask of cold fury that made her look like a beautiful statue carved from ice. You have no idea what you're dealing with, little girl, she said, her voice soft and deadly. But you'll learn. Soon enough. She turned on her heel and swept from the courtyard, her departure leaving behind an uncomfortable silence. Well, Kale said after a moment. That was illuminating. She's dangerous. I was still shaking from the confrontation, from the rush of power that had flooded through me. The spirits, they're terrified of her. With good reason. His expression was grim. Seraphina has always believed she should rule Shadowmere. My refusal to take a mate gave her hope that she might eventually succeed me. And now I've ruined that dream. Now you've given her a target. He moved closer, his hand finding mine and squeezing gently. Which is why your training is so important. The abilities you showed just now, reading the spirit's memories, channeling their emotions, that's advanced soul walker magic. It should have taken you months to develop that level of control. Then why does it feel so natural? Before he could answer, a commotion erupted from the direction of the main gates. Shouts echoed across the courtyard, followed by the sound of running feet. A moment later, a young man in the dark blue uniform of Shadowmere's guard burst through the courtyard entrance. Your Majesty, he gasped, dropping to one knee. Urgent news from the border scouts. Kale's entire demeanor shifted, the concerned mate disappearing as the Alpha King took control. Report. 7 packs march toward our borders, sire. They fly war banners and demand audience with you. Their message. The guard swallowed hard. They claim you hold a false mate and demand her immediate release. My blood turned to ice. 7 packs. The 7 that had rejected me were coming here, ready to start a war over my supposed deception. How long until they reach our borders? Kale's voice was perfectly controlled, but I could feel the rage radiating from him in waves. 3 days, Majesty. Maybe less if they push through the night. Double the border patrols. Send word to all Alliance members, if these packs want a fight, they'll get one. Kale dismissed the guard with a sharp gesture, then turned to me. I'm sorry, Arya. I'd hoped we'd have more time. Time for what? For you to master your abilities. For the bond between us to strengthen. For you to understand exactly what you're capable of. His hands framed my face, thumbs brushing across my cheekbones. Those packs are coming here to kill you. They believe that destroying you will prove I'm weak, that Shadowmere is vulnerable. Are we? Vulnerable, I mean? His smile was sharp and dangerous. Only if they're stupid enough to attack a kingdom protected by the dead. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparation. Kale disappeared into meetings with his war council while I continued training with Evangeline and the other spirits. My abilities grew stronger with each passing hour, but so did my questions about the man I was supposedly destined to love. He'd known my parents. He'd been there when they died. He'd saved me from that fire but then abandoned me to a life of rejection and pain. Now he claimed I was his mate, his salvation, but how could I trust someone who kept so many secrets? You're troubled, child. Evangeline materialized beside me as I sat in the palace gardens, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Wouldn't you be? I asked. 3 days ago, I was homeless and dying. Now I'm supposedly the mate of an immortal king, learning to speak with the dead, and preparing for a war I never wanted. Change is never easy, she agreed. But some changes are necessary for growth. Or for destruction. She was quiet for a moment, her translucent form flickering slightly. You want to ask me something? I can feel your curiosity like a physical presence. I hesitated, then decided I had nothing to lose. My parents. Alexander and Elena. Are there spirits here in Shadowmere? The question seemed to hit her like a physical blow. Her form wavered, becoming less solid, and when she spoke, her voice carried a sadness that made my chest ache. Oh, sweet child. You don't know, do you? Know what? Instead of answering, she began to fade away. Some questions are too dangerous for the dead to answer. Ask the living, Arya. Ask the one who holds their chains. She vanished completely, leaving me alone with a growing sense of dread. Chains. She'd said chains, not bonds. As if my parents weren't just here, as if they were being held here against their will. I stood on shaking legs and headed back into the palace, my mind racing. If my parents' spirits were trapped in Shadowmere, there was only one person with the power to hold them. Kale. I found him in his private study, bent over ancient maps with several members of his council. He looked up when I entered, his expression softening from commander to lover in an instant. Gentlemen, we'll continue this tomorrow. His dismissal was polite but firm. The council members filed out quickly, leaving us alone. Arya, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. His attempt at humor fell flat. Have I? I asked quietly. Seen a ghost, I mean. Specifically, 2 ghosts who should mean everything to me. He went very still. What are you talking about? My parents, Kale. Where are my parents' spirits? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. They're at peace. Liar. The word came out with more venom than I'd intended. Evangeline as much as told me they're here, in Shadowmere. She said to ask the one who holds their chains. Something flickered across his features, guilt, pain, and something that might have been fear. Arya, you don't understand. Then explain it to me. I slammed my hand down on his desk, scattering papers. Stop protecting me from the truth and tell me what you've done. For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then his shoulders sagged as if he were carrying an invisible weight. Come with me, he said quietly. There's something I need to show you. He led me deeper into the palace than I'd been before, down corridors carved from living stone and lit by torches that burned with cold, silver flame. The air grew thicker as we descended, heavy with magic and sorrow. Finally, we stopped before a door that looked like it had been sealed for centuries. Cale placed his hand on the dark wood, and I heard the sound of multiple locks disengaging. "Before we go in," he said without turning around, "you need to understand that everything I did was to protect them." "To protect you? From what?" "From the fate that awaits all spirits who die violently. From being consumed by their own anger and pain until they become something monstrous." He turned to face me, and I was shocked by the anguish in his silver eyes. When someone dies the way your parents did, betrayed, murdered, their child left orphaned, their spirits don't find peace. They become wraiths, driven mad by their need for vengeance. "So you trapped them." "I contained them," he corrected. "I created a sanctuary where they could exist without being consumed by their rage. Where they could remain themselves instead of becoming monsters. For 22 years. For 22 years, he agreed. The door swung open, revealing a room that took my breath away. It was beautiful, walls covered in murals depicting scenes of happiness and love, comfortable furniture arranged around a fireplace that crackled with warm, golden flame. And there, sitting together on a love seat as if they'd been waiting for this moment their entire afterlife, were my parents. "Hello, little star," my father said, his voice exactly as I remembered from the few clear memories of my childhood. "We've been waiting for you to come home." My mother rose gracefully, her spirit form solid and radiant with love. "My beautiful daughter. Look how you've grown." I stood frozen in the doorway, overwhelmed by emotions I couldn't name. Joy at seeing them. Anger at the deception. Confusion about what this meant for everything I thought I knew about Cale. "Why?" I whispered, looking back at him. "Why keep them from me? Why let me believe I was alone in the world when they were here all along?" "Because," my father answered before Cale could speak, "we asked him to." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "Oh, sweetheart." My mother moved toward me, her form flickering slightly at the edges. "We couldn't let you grow up surrounded by death. Couldn't let you spend your childhood speaking with parents who existed only as shadows of who we used to be. We wanted you to have a chance at a normal life," my father added. "Even if that meant sacrificing our chance to watch you grow up." But I didn't have a normal life. The words tore from my throat. I was rejected, abandoned, treated like I was broken and worthless. "We know." My mother's voice carried infinite sadness. "And we argued with Cale about it constantly. We wanted him to take you in, to raise you as his own. But he refused." I turned to look at Cale, who stood in the doorway like a statue carved from shadow and regret. "Why?" "Because I was in love with your mother." The admission hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. My father didn't look surprised, but my mother's expression crumpled with pain. "Cale," she whispered. "It's true," he continued, his voice hollow. "I had been for years before she met Alexander. When she chose him, I accepted it because I wanted her to be happy. But after they died, after I pulled you from that fire." He swallowed hard. "Taking you in would have meant spending every day looking at Elena's eyes in your face, hearing Alexander's laugh in your voice. I wasn't strong enough for that." The truth was uglier than any lie he could have told. I stared at him, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. Not the powerful alpha king or the destined mate, but a man who had let his own broken heart doom a child to years of pain and rejection. "So you kept them prisoner and abandoned me." My voice was eerily calm. "And now you expect me to believe this mate bond is real? That it's not just guilt masquerading as destiny? Arya, please." "No." I backed toward the door, needing distance from all of them. "I need time to think. Time to figure out who I can trust in this mess." "The 7 packs will be here in 3 days, Cale said desperately. "You need to be ready." "Maybe I don't want to be ready." I looked at my parents, these spirits I'd dreamed of finding my entire life, and felt only emptiness. Maybe I'd rather face them alone than stand beside someone who's built our entire relationship on lies. I turned and walked away, leaving behind the 3 people who should have meant the most to me in the world. Behind me, I heard my mother calling my name, my father trying to explain, Cale begging me to come back. But I kept walking, my heart breaking with every step, until the sound of their voices faded into silence. 3 days until war arrived at our gates. 3 days to decide if I was fighting for a kingdom built on secrets, or if I was ready to face whatever came next entirely on my own terms. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 4. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I paced my chambers like a caged animal, my mind churning with everything I'd learned. Every few minutes, I'd catch myself reaching for the door handle, ready to march back down to that beautiful prison and demand more answers from the 3 people who'd shaped my entire existence through their lies and omissions. But I always stopped myself. Because deep down, I was terrified of what else I might discover. The morning brought no peace, only the sound of war drums echoing across Shadowmere's walls. From my window, I could see the 7-pack coalition spread across the valley below like a dark stain against the green landscape. Thousands of wolves, all united in their determination to see me destroyed. A soft knock interrupted my brooding. "Come in," I called, expecting one of the servants. Instead, my mother materialized through the solid door, her spirit form more translucent than it had been the night before. The sight of her sent a fresh wave of pain through my chest. "We need to talk, little star." "Do we?" "Because I'm pretty sure everything important was covered last night." I turned back to the window, unable to look at her without seeing everything I'd lost. 22 years of abandonment. Cale's unrequited love. Your convenient imprisonment. What else is there to discuss? The prophecy. The word hit me like ice water. I spun to face her, seeing something in her ethereal features that made my blood run cold. "What prophecy?" "The one your father and I died trying to prevent from falling into the wrong hands. The one Cale has kept us bound here to protect." Her form flickered with agitation. "The prophecy of the Soul Walker's choice." "I don't want to hear this." "You have to." She moved closer, and I could feel the supernatural chill that surrounded all spirits. "Arya, there's a reason you're the first Soul Walker born in 3 centuries. A reason your abilities are so powerful, so instinctive. You're not just connected to the world of the dead, you're the bridge between life and death itself." "That's impossible." "Is it? Think about what you've accomplished in just 2 days. You can see spirits without training, command their memories, channel their emotions. Last night, you made yourself solid enough to slam your hand on Cale's desk. Do you have any idea how much power that requires?" I hadn't thought about it, but she was right. Normal spirits could barely maintain their form, let alone interact with physical objects. Yet I'd been unconsciously drawing on abilities that should have taken decades to master. The prophecy speaks of a soul walker who will be born in the darkest hour, when the barriers between worlds grow thin, my mother continued. This walker will face a choice that determines the fate of all supernatural creatures. She will either become the savior who strengthens the veil between life and death, or the destroyer who tears it down completely. "And you think I'm this prophetic soul walker?" "I know you are." Her voice carried absolute certainty. "The signs are all there, Arya. Your unprecedented power, the timing of your birth, even the mate bond with Cale, it's all connected." "What does Cale have to do with the prophecy?" Something dark crossed her features. "The prophecy states that the soul walker's choice will be influenced by love. That her heart will be torn between the living and the dead, between justice and mercy. Cale was supposed to be your anchor to the world of the living, the one who would help you choose salvation over destruction. But we never anticipated that he would bind us here. That his guilt and unrequited love would lead him to commit the very crime that makes the choice so difficult." She moved to the window, gazing down at the assembled armies. "By trapping us, he's ensured that when the moment comes, you'll have to choose between freeing the dead and saving the living. The implications crashed over me like a tidal wave. He knew. This whole time, he knew about the prophecy, and he still bound us to prevent the information from reaching our enemies, she finished. Because if they knew what you were, they would stop at nothing to either control you or destroy you. Like those armies down there. Those armies are the least of our concerns. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Arya, there are darker forces at work here. Ancient enemies who have been waiting centuries for a soul walker to emerge. They want to use your power to tear down the barriers that keep the dead in their realm. And if the barriers fall? Every spirit that has ever existed would be unleashed on the world of the living. Billions of souls, most of them driven mad by centuries of death and decay. It would be the end of everything. The weight of her words settled on my shoulders like a lead cloak. I was 22 years old. 3 days ago, I'd been wolfless and homeless. Now I was supposedly destined to either save or destroy the entire supernatural world. What am I supposed to do with this information? I asked quietly. Make the right choice when the time comes, she said. And pray that love is stronger than vengeance. Before I could ask what she meant, she faded away, leaving me alone with the terrible knowledge of what I truly was. The attack came at noon. I was in the main courtyard, practicing my spirit-walking abilities under Evangeline's guidance, when the first explosions rocked Shadowmere's walls. The ancient stones held, but cracks appeared in several places, letting in streams of sunlight that shouldn't have existed. They're using magic, Kale's voice cut through the chaos as he sprinted into the courtyard, his war council close behind. Some kind of barrier-breaking spell. Seraphina, I said with sudden certainty. She's helping them. His silver eyes met mine across the courtyard, and I saw my suspicion confirmed in their depths. She left this morning with a full escort. Claimed she was going to negotiate a peaceful solution. Another explosion, closer this time. Dust rained from the ceiling of the covered walkways, and several of the weaker spirits flickered out of existence entirely. Your Majesty. A guard rushed in, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. The eastern wall is breached. Luna Seraphina approaches under a flag of parley, but she's not alone. Kale cursed in a language I didn't recognize. How many? 24 of their strongest warriors, sire. And the guard's face went pale. They have a witch with them. One of the old blood. The color drained from Kale's face. Evangeline, he called to the spirit healer. Get Arya to the deep chambers. Keep her safe until. No. I stepped forward, surprised by the strength in my own voice. I'm not hiding while people die defending me. Arya, you don't understand. If they capture you. If they capture me, they'll learn about the prophecy anyway, I interrupted. At least this way, I can fight back. Before he could argue, a new voice rang out across the courtyard, cultured, familiar, and dripping with false courtesy. Brother dear. I've brought some friends to meet your pet. Seraphina stood in the breach that had been torn in the eastern wall, surrounded by wolves in their human forms and one figure that made my blood turn to ice. The witch was ancient, older than anything should be allowed to exist. Her skin was like parchment stretched over bones, her white hair hanging in matted strings. But her eyes burned with a malevolent intelligence that spoke of centuries spent studying the darkest forms of magic. Luna Seraphina, Kale's voice carried across the courtyard with alpha authority. You stand in violation of kingdom law. Surrender now, and I might show mercy. Seraphina's laughter was like breaking glass. Mercy? From the king who binds the souls of the innocent? I think not. She gestured to the witch, who raised a gnarled staff topped with what looked like a crystal skull. Dark energy swirled around the artifact, and when she spoke, her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. Kale Shadowmere, the witch intoned, you who have bound the dead to serve your will, who have perverted the natural order for your own selfish desires. By the ancient laws of magic, I call for judgment. Don't listen to her, I shouted, but even as the words left my mouth, I felt something shift in the air around us. The spirits that had been gathering to defend Shadowmere suddenly wavered, their forms becoming less solid. "She's severing the connections," Evangeline gasped, her own form flickering dangerously. "The witch, she's cutting the bonds that allow us to manifest in this realm." Kale snarled and launched himself toward the breach, his form shifting mid-leap into the largest wolf I'd ever seen. His fur was silver-black, and his eyes blazed with supernatural fire as he covered the distance to his enemies in seconds. He never reached them. The witch pointed her staff directly at him and spoke a single word in a language that predated human civilization. Dark energy erupted from the crystal skull, striking Kale mid-transform and sending him crashing to the ground in a tangle of limbs that were neither fully human nor fully wolf. "Kale!" I ran toward him, but Seraphina's warriors blocked my path. One of them, Alpha Marcus from Crescent Moon Pack, smiled at me with cruel satisfaction. "The mighty Soul Walker," he sneered. "You don't look so powerful now." I ignored him, focusing on Kale's prone form. He was trying to shift back to human form, but something was wrong. His body seemed to be fighting itself, caught between transformations in a way that looked agonizing. "What did you do to him?" I demanded, turning on the witch. Her ancient face split in a smile that revealed teeth like yellowed fangs. "Spirit-severing toxin," she cackled. "Designed specifically for those who traffic with the dead. It cuts the connection between body and soul, between the living and the supernatural realm they draw power from." "He'll die," I whispered. "Oh yes, slowly and painfully. Unless..." She tilted her head like a curious bird. "Unless his connection to the spirit realm is restored. But that would require freeing all the souls he's bound, wouldn't it? Every spirit trapped in Shadowmere would have to be released for the magic to work. The choice. This was the choice my mother had warned me about. Save Kale by freeing all the spirits, including my parents, including the dangerous souls he'd bound for good reason. Or let him die and keep the supernatural world safe from whatever chaos their release might bring. Around us, the battle raged. Shadowmere's guards fought desperately against the coalition forces, but they were vastly outnumbered. More of our defending spirits flickered out of existence as the witch's magic continued to sever their connections to our realm. "Choose quickly, little soul walker," Seraphina called out. "My dear brother doesn't have much time left." I knelt beside Kale, placing my hand on his chest. His skin was burning with fever, and I could feel the poison working through his system, slowly severing every supernatural bond that kept him alive. "Arya," he gasped, his silver eyes unfocused with pain. Don't do it. The risk is too great." "What risk? Tell me the truth for once in your life." His hand found mine, gripping with what little strength he had left. "Some of the spirits I've bound, they're not like your parents. They're dangerous. Vengeful. If you free them all, they'll seek revenge against the living," I finished. "Not just revenge. They'll try to tear down the barriers between life and death. They'll use your power as a soul walker too." He convulsed, his body seizing as another wave of poison coursed through him. The choice crystallized in my mind with terrible clarity. Free all the spirits and save Kale, but risk unleashing chaos on the world. Or let him die and keep everyone safe, but lose the only person who'd ever made me feel like I belonged somewhere. "There has to be another way," I said desperately. "Child." Evangeline appeared beside me, her form barely visible now. "There is something you should know. Something we discovered while you were training." "What?" Her fading form leaned closer. "You're with child, Arya. Kale's child. The bond between you has created life." The world stopped. Pregnant. I was pregnant with the child of an immortal Alpha King. With a child who, according to the prophecy, might be the key to everything. "How is that possible?" I whispered. "We haven't even." "Soul bonds work differently," she explained, her voice growing fainter. "When two souls recognize each other as mates, when the connection is strong enough, life can be created through the bond itself. The child will be more powerful than either parent, born with abilities from both the living and the dead. The prophecy, I breathed. This is what it meant about the soul walker's choice being influenced by love. Not romantic love, maternal love. The choice between saving my mate and protecting my unborn child. If I freed all the spirits to save Kale, I would be unleashing forces that could destroy the world my child would inherit. But if I let Kale die, I would be dooming my child to grow up without a father, just as I had. Tick-tock, little wolf walker, the witch called out. Your king grows weaker with each passing moment. I looked around the courtyard, taking in the chaos of battle, the fading spirits, Kale's deteriorating condition. Then I felt it, a flutter in my abdomen so faint I might have imagined it, but undeniably real. My child. Kale's heir. The future of everything I'd come to love. The choice was impossible. Save my mate and risk destroying the world, or sacrifice him to protect a future I couldn't guarantee. But as I knelt there in the rubble of Shadowmere's courtyard, feeling the life growing inside me and watching the man I loved slowly dying, I realized there might be a third option. One that would require me to embrace everything I was, everything I'd been running from since I arrived in this impossible kingdom. I was the soul walker. The bridge between life and death. Maybe it was time to start building bridges instead of choosing sides. Standing slowly, I placed one hand on my still flat stomach and the other over Kale's heart. Around us, the battle continued to rage, but I blocked it all out, focusing on the connections I could feel thrumming through Shadowmere's ancient stones. Every spirit bound within these walls. Every soul trapped between life and death. Every thread of magic that held this kingdom together. I was connected to all of it. And maybe, just maybe, that connection was the key to saving everyone I loved without damning the world in the process. I know what I have to do, I said quietly. The real question was whether I was strong enough to survive it. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 5. Power rushed through me like liquid fire as I reached for the connections that bound every spirit in Shadowmere. Not to release them as the witch expected, but to pull them closer, to merge the barrier between the living and dead until both worlds existed in the same space. What are you doing? Serafina screamed, but her voice seemed to come from very far away. I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Every ounce of my concentration was focused on the impossible task of bridging two realms that were never meant to touch. The pendant at my throat blazed with heat so intense it should have burned my skin, but instead it felt like coming alive for the first time in my life. The transformation began at my feet. The solid stone of Shadowmere's courtyard started to glow with ethereal silver light, and suddenly spirits weren't just visible, they were solid. Evangeline gasped as her translucent form gained substance, her ghostly robes becoming rich fabric that rustled in the supernatural winds swirling around us. Impossible, the ancient witch breathed, her confidence cracking for the first time. No soul walker has ever had the power to. No soul walker has ever been pregnant with an Alpha King's heir, I said, my voice echoing with harmonics that belonged to both the living and the dead. My child's power is already flowing through me, amplifying everything I am. The merged realm expanded outward like ripples on a pond. Where the silver light touched, everything changed. The attacking coalition forces found themselves face to face with spirits they'd sent to early graves. Ancient wolf warriors materialized beside Shadowmere's defenders, their spectral weapons suddenly as deadly as steel and silver. But it was my parents' arrival that truly shifted the balance of power. Alexander and Elena Blackthorn stepped through the walls of their beautiful prison as if they were made of mist, and for the first time since their deaths, they looked like the powerful alphas they'd been in life. My father's presence commanded instant respect from every wolf in the courtyard, living and dead alike. My mother moved with deadly grace toward where Kale lay dying, her healer's training evident in every step. Arya, she said softly, kneeling beside him. Hold the merger steady. I can cleanse the poison, but I need the connection between worlds to remain stable. I don't know how long I can maintain this, I admitted. The effort of keeping two realms merged was like holding back an ocean with my bare hands. Then we'd better work quickly. My father's voice carried alpha authority as he turned to face the coalition forces. Marcus Redclaw. You and your allies stand on sacred ground, in direct violation of supernatural law. Withdraw now, or face the consequences. Marcus snarled, but I could see uncertainty in his eyes as he looked around at the spectral army now facing his forces. Alexander Blackthorn died 22 years ago. You have no authority here, Ghost. Perhaps not, my father agreed. But she does. All eyes turned to me as I knelt beside Kale, one hand on his chest and the other pressed to my stomach where our child grew. Power coursed through me in waves, and I could feel something vast and ancient stirring at the edges of my consciousness. Tell them, Arya, my mother urged as golden light flowed from her hands into Kale's body, fighting the witch's poison. Tell them what you've learned. The prophecy, I said, my voice carrying across the merged battlefield with supernatural clarity. It was never about me choosing between salvation and destruction. It was about revealing the real enemy. The ancient witch hissed, her form beginning to waver as if my words were somehow damaging her. Silence, child. You know nothing of the forces you meddle with. Don't I? I stood slowly, feeling power build around me like a storm about to break. I know you're not really a witch at all. I know you're something much older, much darker. Something that's been manipulating werewolf society for centuries. The creature's disguise began to fall away like smoke, revealing something that made every wolf in the courtyard, living and dead, take an involuntary step backward. She was tall and emaciated, with skin like charred bone and eyes that burned with the fire of dying stars. When she smiled, her teeth were rows of gleaming obsidian. Very good, little soul walker, she said, her voice now carrying the weight of eons. I am Morrigan, the hunger that waits. I have walked between the worlds since before your precious werewolves learned to shift their shapes. You're what killed my parents, I realized with crystalline clarity. You're what's been orchestrating the divisions between packs, the rejections, the wars. All to create the perfect conditions for a soul walker to emerge. Clever girl. Morrigan's form began to expand, growing larger and more terrible with each passing second. I have waited so long for one of your kind to be born. So long to finally have a bridge powerful enough to tear down the barriers between life and death permanently. But that would destroy both worlds, Seraphina protested, finally understanding the true scope of what she'd helped unleash. Yes, Morrigan agreed pleasantly. And from the ashes of two dying realms, I will feast on the chaos until only I remain. Eternal. Unopposed. Free. The ancient evil lunged toward me with impossible speed, claws extended and mouth opened wide enough to swallow the sun. But she never reached me. Kale intercepted her mid-leap, his body wreathed in silver fire as my mother's healing magic burned away the last of the poison. He'd shifted into his wolf form, but not the massive creature I'd seen before. This was something beyond physical transformation, a being of pure alpha power given shape and substance. You will not touch my mate, he snarled, his voice echoing from both the living and spirit realms simultaneously. You will not threaten my child. The battle that followed defied every law of physics and magic I'd ever learned. Morrigan was ancient beyond measure, her power drawn from the primordial chaos that existed before order came to the universe. But Kale was something she hadn't expected, an alpha king bonded to a soul walker, fighting not just for his own life but for the future of their unborn child. They clashed in midair, silver fire meeting endless darkness, creation battling entropy. Around them, the merged battlefield erupted into chaos as coalition forces found themselves fighting alongside the very spirits they'd helped create. The old divisions between packs became meaningless in the face of absolute annihilation. I wanted to help, to add my power to Kale's, but maintaining the merger between worlds was taking everything I had. I could feel the barriers straining, reality itself groaning under the pressure of containing two incompatible realms in the same space. Arya. My father appeared beside me, his spirit form blazing with paternal fury. The merger is failing, If it collapses while that creature is partially in both worlds, she'll be torn apart, I finished. But so will everyone else caught in the convergence zone. Not everyone, my mother said quietly. She had finished healing Kale, but instead of stepping back to safety, she moved to stand on my other side. A soul walker can anchor the merger permanently, but only by becoming a permanent bridge between the worlds. The implications hit me like a physical blow. I'd be trapped forever. Neither fully alive nor truly dead. You'd be something new, she corrected. Something the world has never seen before. A queen who rules over both the living and the dead. Above us, Kale and Morrigan continued their deadly dance. The Alpha King was holding his own, but I could see he was tiring. The ancient evil seemed to draw strength from the chaos around her, growing larger and more terrible with each passing moment. Decide quickly, my father urged. The merger won't hold much longer. I closed my eyes and reached out with my soul walker senses, feeling the connections that bound every spirit in Shadowmere, every wolf fighting in the courtyard, every life that hung in the balance. Including the tiny spark of existence growing in my womb, my child, who would inherit this world whether I saved it or let it burn. The choice was no choice at all. I opened my eyes and smiled at my parents, the spirits who had shaped my entire existence through their love and their sacrifices. Tell Kale I love him. Tell our child that everything I did was for them. Before they could stop me, I released my hold on the partial merger and embraced total convergence. Pain unlike anything I'd ever experienced tore through every cell in my body as the barriers between life and death didn't just collapse, they remade themselves with me as their cornerstone. I felt my consciousness expand beyond the limitations of physical form, touching every soul in both realms simultaneously. But along with the pain came power. Unlimited, absolute power over both the living and the dead. I rose into the air, no longer entirely physical but not purely spirit either. Something between, something new. My voice carried across both realms as I spoke the words that would end this forever. Morrigan, hunger that waits, I name you and I bind you. The ancient evil shrieked as chains of silver fire erupted from the merged ground, wrapping around her monstrous form. You cannot. I am eternal. I am. You are contained, I said simply. By my will and by the power of every soul you've tormented across the centuries. You wanted a bridge between worlds? You have it. I am that bridge, and through me, your victims demand justice. The chains tightened, and Morrigan's form began to collapse in on itself. But even as she was being destroyed, she laughed with genuine delight. You think you've won? You've given me exactly what I wanted. Now the barriers are gone forever. Now chaos will. Her words cut off as she imploded into nothingness, leaving behind only a fading echo of malevolent laughter. The silence that followed was deafening. Slowly, I descended back to the courtyard, my feet touching ground that was no longer quite solid, no longer quite ethereal. Around me, living wolves and spirits alike stared in awe and terror at what I'd become. Arya? Kale's voice was soft, uncertain. He stood a few feet away in his human form, silver eyes wide with love and fear. Are you still you? I smiled at him, feeling the weight of two realms settling across my shoulders like a royal cloak. I'm more me than I've ever been. But I'm also something else now. Something that can never go back to what I was before. What are you? Marcus Redclaw whispered from where he knelt among the ruins of his army's confidence. I am the Soul Walker, I said, my voice carrying harmonics from both worlds. I am the bridge between life and death. I am the queen of the damned and divine. I looked around at the assembled wolves, those who had rejected me, those who had followed me, those who had fought against me. And you will all kneel. It wasn't a request. Power rolled from me in waves that made the ground tremble and the spirits glow brighter. One by one, every wolf in the courtyard dropped to their knees, their heads bowed in submission to something beyond their understanding. All except Kale, who stepped forward and took my transformed hand in his. My queen, he said formally, but his eyes held only love. What are your commands? I squeezed his fingers, marveling at how I could still feel the warmth of his touch despite everything I'd become. Rise, my king. We have a world to rebuild. 3 months later. The Great Hall of Shadowmere had been transformed into something that had never existed before, a throne room where the living and the dead held court together. Spirits served as advisors alongside flesh and blood wolves, and the barriers between the realms had become so fluid that death was no longer the ending it had once been. I sat on a throne carved from the same black stone as Shadowmere's foundation, Kael beside me on a matching seat of power. My hand rested on the gentle curve of my stomach, where our child grew stronger every day. Already, I could feel the little one's power, a perfect fusion of alpha authority and soul walker magic that would reshape the supernatural world. The Northern Pacts have agreed to the new treaty, Kael reported, his voice carrying easily through the hall where living pack leaders and spectral advisors gathered. They formally acknowledge your authority and request membership in the new alliance. Granted, I said simply. The Northern Pacts had been among the last holdouts, clinging to the old ways where power was everything and the weak had no place. But even they couldn't argue with results. Under our rule, attacks from rogue supernaturals had ceased entirely. Ancient feuds between packs were being resolved through supernatural mediation rather than warfare. The fractured werewolf world was finally healing. Your Majesty, Marcus Redclaw stepped forward from the assembled crowd. The former Alpha of Crescent Moon Pack had become one of my most devoted followers once he understood what I truly represented. The Seven Packs Coalition formally requests your forgiveness for our actions against the realm. I studied him for a long moment, remembering the pain and humiliation I'd felt standing in his rejection circle. But that seemed like a lifetime ago now, and the woman I'd been then might not even recognize the being I'd become. Marcus Redclaw, I said finally. You and your allies acted out of ignorance, not malice. You saw something you didn't understand and tried to eliminate what you perceived as a threat. I leaned forward slightly. But ignorance is no longer acceptable. If you wish my forgiveness, you must swear to help build a world where no wolf, regardless of their perceived power or lack thereof, faces rejection or abandonment again. I swear it, he said immediately, dropping to one knee. By my pack's honor and my own life, I swear it. Around the hall, the other former coalition leaders echoed his oath. They had learned, as all wolves eventually did, that true power wasn't about domination or fear. It was about unity, about lifting up the weak alongside the strong. As the formal audience continued, I felt a familiar stirring in my abdomen. Our child was active today, their power already responding to the supernatural energy that filled Shadowmere's halls. According to Evangeline and the other healer spirits, the baby would be born in 3 months, the first Soul Walker Alpha in recorded history. What are you thinking about? Kael asked quietly during a brief recess. Our child, I admitted. What kind of world they'll inherit? What kind of challenges they'll face? His hand covered mine on my stomach. They'll face them with power beyond anything we can imagine. And they'll have the greatest parents in supernatural history to guide them. I smiled, feeling the truth of his words in the way our child responded to his touch. Do you think they'll forgive us for bringing them into all this responsibility? I think, he said, leaning over to kiss my temple, they'll be grateful we gave them a world worth protecting. Later that evening, after the last petitioner had been heard and the living court had retired for the night, I found myself in the same courtyard where my transformation had taken place. The merged realm was stable now, neither fully physical nor entirely spiritual, but something altogether new. My parents materialized beside me, their forms solid and warm in the way they'd never been when they were trapped. Any regrets? My father asked, settling onto a bench that existed in both worlds simultaneously. About becoming what I am? No. I touched my stomach again, feeling our child's contentment. But I do wonder what would have happened if Morrigan had never existed. If you hadn't died protecting me. If I'd grown up normally with my wolf instead of becoming something unprecedented. You would have been extraordinary anyway, my mother said with absolute certainty. Soul Walker or not, pregnant with the future or not, you were always destined for greatness, little star. We just didn't know what form it would take. And now? She gestured around us, at the impossible kingdom where spirits and living beings worked side by side, where ancient prejudices were giving way to new understanding, where love had triumphed over fear and chaos. Now you're exactly what the world needed you to become. As if in response to her words, our child stirred again, and for just a moment, I could swear I felt their consciousness brush against mine, ancient and knowing, but also playful and curious about the world they would soon enter. A world where anything was possible. A world where a wolfless girl could become queen of the damned and divine. A world where love really could conquer all. I smiled and placed both hands over my growing child, already excited to meet the little soul walker Alpha who would write the next chapter of our impossible story. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily and also, to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.